So to handle impediments that are outside of the team's control, there are two things that I can recommend. The first one is that if you come up with a problem outside of the team's control, then try to translate it into something that is within the team's control. Often things are actually more under your control than you realize. And in the absolute worst case, the one thing you can control is yourself and your emotional response to the problem that you're experiencing. So mark this down as an issue, but then make sure that you work on your team's emotions, because that's what actually you can impact in the end. The second thing that I'd recommend is to make sure that your organization has a system in place to encourage cross-team communication of retrospective impediments. Because if you're experiencing a problem at the organizational level, the chances are another team is having the same problem. But if you don't talk to each other, then you won't ever know. So someone who maybe is an Agile coach, or someone who's a VP of engineering, for example, someone who has a cross-team view should have the ability to see what these issues are to try to help you out on them.
So this is why I like the circles and soup exercise. So the way the exercise runs is the team collects a bunch of issues they're dealing with. And then they start putting them in concentric circles on a wall or a virtual whiteboard. The center circle is for issues they can control. What do they have the power to do something about? The second outer circle is maybe they don't have control, but they can influence others, maybe other teams or other groups, to help them deal with those issues. And the last outer circle is the soup. There's nothing they can do about it. They can't prevent them, but how can they maybe react to these, or who do they need to reach out to? And that's why I like that exercise. It's a very easy way for teams to visualize what are different types of things that we have to deal with and how can we deal with them.
This brings me back to my favorite retrospective activity, which is the paradox intervention. Because if we feel like we cannot make a difference, we cannot make any change because it's not in our control, if you then start with a team to look at how can we make that situation worse, which is the paradoxy here, then people realize that if they can make it worse, they can also make it better. And the better thing might be the way we react to anything that comes to us, or how we can help people who deal with us to make that thing worse or better. And so this really helps people to think outside the box and also pushing it away from them, because sometimes I feel like it's out of our control because we are always looking at stuff that's out of our control. It's also a cultural thing often of a team to always come up and find stuff that's not in the control of the team.
Oh, you have hit upon yet another topic that I love to talk about. So first of all, I've been in lots and lots of organizations that the main impediments are actually not at the team level and they are outside the team's control. So I would say, first of all, you have to have a protocol for what to do with those items. If you haven't even set up a protocol for that, then you're kind of dead in the water because teams aren't going to know what to do. So I've had teams have wiki pages or Kanban boards. So the first step would be to decide how to handle them across teams. And then how do we decide to group them and discover that we have themes? So I had in one company, we set up a Kanban board for teams to add their impediments, and then we grouped them with epics. And that made it really visible. And then last, we have to have a protocol for deciding, once it's documented, who will take those forward. And so from that, I've had anybody from Agile coaches or Scrum masters or managers to pick up items and own them for further disposition. And it usually starts with measurement of the impact of the impediment.
Oh, that totally depends on the context, what kind of impediments we're talking about. Well, first of all, any problem the team can handle by itself is not an impediment, so I wouldn't touch those. But impediments that land on my desk in the end, that really depends on the culture of the organization, on the organization itself, what state they are at, and a lot of different factors so a generalized answer, I find it very hard to come up with one. Basically, work them, prioritize them, order them, and start working the list top down. There's nothing else that you can do.
This is an interesting one because one of the things I'm kind of known for, and Esther too, the two of us kind of came up with this at one point, is called the circles of control. And it's an activity that a team can do once they have identified all of their issues. We draw a big 3 concentric circles on the whiteboard, and the central circle is where people put sticky notes, the team members put sticky notes of the things that are in their control. And then the next layer out is the things they can influence, and the next layer out is the things that they cannot influence. We call that the soup, just how things are around here. And that was inspired by some other colleagues, David Schmaltz and some other folks. So the idea is, though, that for each of those circles, there is an action you can take. That when the team has control, they can take direct action, they can make the changes they want. When they have influence, they can take recommending or persuasive actions. And when things are in the soup, they can change how they respond. So there's always action that teams can take. It just looks different depending on the kind of issue they're working with.
So handling impediments that are out of the team's control is interesting. I mentioned earlier that part of what is useful about retrospectives is a cathartic effect. And so sometimes people just want to complain and just get it off their shoulders, and there is not really much you can do, but it's still helpful to do that. But yeah, some people have a knack externally, and everyone's got their own superpower. So hopefully there's someone on your team or someone in your leadership chain that will go to bat for you and essentially be the servant leader that goes and influences the behavior or the prioritization of outside groups, so you can do what you want to do as well. And then other times you can just jump in and do it for them. I mean, a lot in the culture of software development, pull request. If somebody if you need an API to do something and it's not in the current product, well, let's modify their product as a pull request and then let them decide whether they incorporate it or not. So we've done all the hard work, and all they have to do is decide whether or not they want to let it into their code base. So you can jump in and sort of swim outside of your lane a little bit to help out somebody else.